Welcome to this candidates forum tonight. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Susan Stomp. I'm a member of the Marine Conservation League Board of Directors and chair of the Land Use, Transportation, and Water Committee, and have the pleasure of helping to put this together to fulfill the desire of the Water Committee to do something to provide an opportunity to have the public hear directly from the candidates for this important election. So thank you very much for coming. And thank you to the League of Women Voters for sharing their expertise in doing candidate forums and working with us on this. So thank you for coming. We appreciate your interest in this election. And by being here, you demonstrate that you're very interested in what is going on and doing your part in voting when the time comes, so that this water board will have a good representation of the community in making the decision. So thank you very much for coming. I'll turn you over to Linda Deere with the League of Women Voters of Marin, who will be our moderator tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Hello and welcome to this candidate forum presented by the League of Women Voters of Marin County and the Marin Conservation League. I am Linda Deere of the Marin League, and I will be your moderator this evening. With me is our timekeeper, Elaine Biagini, as well as our question review team, Susan Stomp, Linda Sula, Roger Roberts, and Ann Thomas. The 7 candidates here with us tonight are running to represent geographic divisions 1, 3, and 4 on the Marin Water Board. Each director will serve a 4-year term. Candidates for Division 1 are Jack Gibson, Matthew Sampson. For Division 3, Larry Bragman, Jack Kenny, and Ranjiv Kush. For Division 4, Shauna Katzman and Jed Smith. Before we get started, let's quickly review a few ground rules. Please take a minute to silence your cell phones and any other noise-making devices. I'll give you a minute to do that. It looks like people are digging into their purses. Because the League is a strictly nonpartisan organization and follows Federal Election Commission rules for candidate forums, no campaign material, including buttons, signs, brochures, t-shirts, etc., is permitted in the auditorium. However, campaign brochures may be placed in the area to your left after the forum has concluded. The Community Media Center of Marin will be recording this forum. The video will be available on the League of Women Voters of Marin County website, as well as Marin TV Channel 30. Please note the signs posted on the walls of this room, one over there and one over there. Your presence here tonight constitutes permission to use your likeness on the air. We encourage audience members to submit questions on the index cards provided. Just raise your hand and Linda, Susan, Roger, or Ann will collect your cards. Each candidate has been invited to make a 2-minute opening statement. We'll begin with Jack Gibson and proceed in the order in which candidates are seated. Jack, 2 minutes for your opener.
Okay, thank you. I guess, is this working? You hear me all right, everybody? All right, I am Jack Gibson. I'm running for re-election to the Marin Municipal Water Board Division 1. Obviously we've been through a lot over the last couple of years. And I have a punch list of, often told, why haven't you done anything since the last drought? Well, the fact of the matter is, we have done many things, and I have a punch list of about 13 significant things. But I've discovered that people are far more interested in what we're going to do than learning about what we did do. So I'm skipping the creation of doubling the size of Kent, creating Sulahuli Reservoir, first recycle effort in Northern California, et cetera. What we're going to do is get more water for Marin. We have, and if you've been watching our meetings, you have seen the Jacobs Engineering that we have hired to help us with this, and we're looking under every stone, basically, for more water. The one I'm most enthusiastic about is a better integration between our partners in North Marin, Sonoma, and basically integrating the infrastructure of the system so we would share reservoirs, have piping back and forth, would enhance our water take from the Russian River, and that's the future I see. That is what I am strongly hoping for and a proponent of. Thank you.
Thanks. Matt, 2 minutes.
Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Excellent. Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Matt Sampson. I'm a Division I Director candidate for the Marin Municipal Water District. I've lived in Division I most of my life. It's where my extended family lives now and most of my close friends. I'm also a proud husband of a scientist, and my wife and I are raising 2 young girls in the division, and it's an area that we've committed to for the future of our girls. I've been a firefighter now for just 25 years, beginning in the division at the Marinewood Fire Department and transferring down to South San Francisco in 2005, where I've served since then, the last 5 years as the Deputy Fire Chief. And since 2017, 2018, we've really concentrated on how we can change our response to wildfires based on the way the climate's affecting the way we're doing things, understanding that we no longer can face the challenges the same way we did yesterday when we're looking forward to tomorrow. I'm running for the position because I don't feel that the current board is acting with the urgency needed to address or strengthen the water supply system and make it more resilient here in the county. And I don't want to end up like we were this time last year when we authorized a $100 million pipeline across a bridge through crisis decision making. I think the ratepayers deserve better, and I think we can do better for the environment. I also don't feel that the current board's acted with the urgency needed to truly address the wildfire risk faced on the 22,000 acres in the watershed. And that more can be done and more should be done quickly for that. But I'm optimistic. I think that I'm ready to rise up to the challenge. I think I bring a new perspective, a new way of thinking to help guide policy to put us back on track. And I'm humbled by the support we're receiving throughout the county, both at the supervisor level, the electeds throughout the city, folks with professional water backgrounds as well as environmental backgrounds backing us, as well as the labor groups that put their support behind our movement. Thank you.
Thanks. Larry, 2-minute opener.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Larry Bragdon. I'm running for re-election to the Marin Water Board, Division 3. I've lived and worked in Marin County for over 40 years. I helped raise 2 stepsons with my wife, Holly. Both of those boys are now launched, but are welcome to return to visit. Just kidding. I've been an attorney my entire adult life and continue to practice to the present day. In 2003, I was elected to the Fairfax Town Council. I served as mayor 2 terms and was re-elected 2 more times. During my time on the council, I helped launch Marin Clean Energy and the Community Media Center of Marin, which will probably be broadcasting this debate later on. In 2014, I was elected to the Marin Water Board, Division 3. The primary issue at that time was the proposed use of Roundup in the watershed. I opposed Roundup. 6 months after I was elected, the World Health Organization declared that Roundup was a probable carcinogen, and our board eventually passed a historic ban on the use of Roundup and other toxic herbicides in the watershed. In 2019, at my urging, the Marin Water Board agreed to televise its meetings to increase public engagement and accountability. In the last 2 years, our agency has endured COVID and drought. In spite of massive increase in unpaid bills from our customers, no one lost service, and our staff worked to keep the system running in spite of the health and safety risks that were involved for many of our frontline workers. Our board has taken a holistic approach to the drought, significantly increasing both water supply and conservation measures. I'd like to continue my work for Division 3, and I've earned the confidence and endorsement of the Sierra Club, Marin Professional Firefighters, Marin Democrats, Congressman Jared Huffman, and many more, and I hope to earn your confidence tonight. Thank you.
Thanks. Jack, 2-minute opening.
Hi, I am Jack Kenny, 19-year resident of Ross, California, and current project director of Point Reyes Public Advocacy. Currently, I feel like the Marin Municipal Water Board needs to do more for drought mitigation, as despite the fact there has been a public concern about the water supply, the Marin Municipal Water Board has failed to come up with a sufficient drought mitigation strategy. And there was even a grand jury report recently filed stating they failed to adequately prepare for the possibility of severe drought. I, Jack Kenny, therefore hope to implement some drought mitigation strategies, such as expanding our recycled water use in Marin County, as well as increasing dam capacities so that some can capture more of the excess rainfall in years with heavy rainstorms to provide extra water for years of drought. And then if that doesn't suffice, also would entertain buying water rights from other counties, or maybe doing desal, hopefully in as sustainable a way as possible. And therefore I hope to improve our drought issues in Marin.
Just a word to the candidates, please speak up. Some of the people in the back are having a little difficulty hearing you, so just talk into that mic and make sure that you're projecting to the back of the room. Ranjiv, 2-minute opening.
Great. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I'm Ranjiv Kush. I'm a water scientist with a PhD in biology. In 2005, I founded a research and consulting organization, the Aquia Institute, that is dedicated to water supply and sanitation planning in the developing world. Our staff are now based in 7 countries, and we have worked on water and sanitation planning in over 20 countries. My family has lived in San Anselmo for 14 years, and we know that there isn't a better place to call home. But my experience with water supply planning at global levels tells me that our local supplier, MMWD, is not planning well for climate change. This is a serious concern for anyone who loves living in Marin. Through my work, I collaborate with water suppliers that are planning well for climate change and those that are not. And I will argue that there are 2 major requirements for good planning. Number 1 is the level of political will among leaders to make difficult and expensive decisions. Number 2 is the ability of leaders to build public support for difficult and expensive decisions. I know that I can bring both of these skills to make a difference at MMWD. That is why I'm running for the Division 3 board seat. I have served on the board of the Marin-Sonoma Vector Control District for the last 6 years. I'm currently the board's secretary. My campaign is endorsed by the president of our Board of Supervisors, Katie Rice. Current and former council members from all of the municipalities in Division 3, the leadership of the Ross Valley Sanitary District, the Marin County Young Democrats, the Marin Coalition for Water Solutions, and a number of local environmental leaders. I look forward to earning your support as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Shona, your 2-minute opening.
Can you hear me? Always happens. Hello? How about now? Okay. Hi, everybody. My name's Shauna Katzman, and I'm running for the Marin Municipal Water Board Division 4. And I just want to thank you for inviting me to participate in tonight's forum. So the reason I chose to run for the Marin Water Board is because right now, Water Board members are making critical, important, and long-lasting decisions about the future for water in Marin. And I think that the next Division 4 director should possess the scientific experience and expertise to ensure that decisions are based on rigorous scientific evidence. I think that board members should have the ability to interpret the data gathered by our specialists with a deep and thorough understanding. I obtained my PhD from UC Davis, where my research focus was aquatic biology. I studied water diversions in the Delta and their impact on the Delta ecosystem, specifically native fishes like the famous Delta smelt, salmon, and green sturgeon. This work was a collaboration with CalFed and multiple California water policymakers. Together, we worked to identify environmentally sound solutions for water intake in the Delta. I'm also a lecturer, and I teach ecology, evolution, and environmental biology to undergraduate students. I pledge that if I'm elected, I will make sure that board decisions are based on robust science that prioritizes the health of our ecosystem and the health of our community. I will also use my skills as a science communicator to make sure that all board decisions and their justifications are clearly communicated to our constituents in a timely manner. I'm honored to be with you tonight and in the company of these amazing other candidates, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you. Jed, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, League of Women Voters and the Marine Conservation League. I've got to know a few of you over the last 6 months as I've been researching and going on a listening tour, trying to understand the issues. My shoulder was tapped by Jared Huffman and some local leaders who said we need some help at MMWD. Will you consider running? But after meeting folks like Larry and Nona, Priscilla, Roger, and everyone I possibly can in our community about the issues, I realized that my background working in sustainability and environmental causes and education causes on over 30 boards, both for-profit and not-for-profit, that my skill set in helping understand the organizational priorities, setting clear strategic agendas, putting together short, medium, and long-term plans, ensuring that the financial structure can support the goals of the endeavor, fit the needs of MMWD, and that's why I decided to run. I've worked on some really interesting companies, from 7th Generation that has done some of the great works in eco-clean products, Revolution Foods that has brought over millions of meals to kids every week nationwide, 75% are low income. Banyan Water that has helped reduce over 13,000 acre-feet of water waste from big corporate and apartment complexes, Eco House and an environmental sustainable building materials company, and on and on. These kinds of companies are trying to address climate change and trying to address sustainability in a way that I think can be beneficial for society. But it's groups like yours, groups like the Sierra Club who have endorsed me, and the 9 mayors in Mill Valley, and Jared Huffman, and some of our really thoughtful folks that have put together concepts like One TAM, that have put together ways that agencies can work together and try to think through how we can better satisfy our watershed needs, our endangered species needs, the 2 million people that recreate, and also, as importantly, obviously, getting our water to our people in a safe and affordable way. I am dedicated to being a steward for our community, and I look forward to working with you to make that happen.
Thank you. And now for the questions. Candidates will each have 1 minute to answer. To be fair, I will rotate the order in which questions are asked. If any of you need me to repeat a question, please just ask. We'll begin with Matt Sampson. 1 minute. Okay. At present, Marin water faces a number of significant and central issues, which makes this election a particularly important one. The purpose of this forum is to explore these issues with you, the candidates for the board. It is clear that Marin water needs to augment its water supply in a challenging world of climate change. A number of water resilience options are being studied and are under consideration. This study, the Strategic Water Supply Assessment, is not completed. But from what you know to date, what strategies do you believe are most promising as a roadmap to meet future supply needs? Matt?
Great. I think the first part of this process is to identify where we want to be, and that seems to be the piece that I haven't heard enough. And for me, I'd like to start with a 4-year supply. It seems pretty common throughout the region and will allow us to go ahead and reverse engineer backwards from that. And once we identify that 4-year supply, that will give us the amount of water we need to get there. And then based on what we currently have, how do we make that happen? And the way I see it right now, the Russian River water especially during the wintertime, is in excess of what's being used. The question is, how do we store it? How do we create extra savings accounts that we can tap into in years such like last year? And I believe we can start looking to our partnership in the north in Sonoma, specifically with groundwater banking, and look to see there and be able to store water and find out how much we can get there first. But then the resiliency piece, making sure that's not just our one option. Based on climate change, we know that we need to have more than one option. And so to continue to increase the recycled water component of what we're doing, expand it out of northern San Rafael.
Thank you. Larry, 1 minute.
Jacobs Engineering is our prime consultant on the strategic water supply assessment. They have identified our annual water deficit as 6,500 to 7,500 acre-feet per year. I believe that we've made great strides in actually meeting that deficit by rebuilding our pumps at Castania, which added 5,000 acre-feet of water flow from Sonoma, which can actually get increased up to 10,000 once we get rid of some pinch points in our system in Marin. I'm also a proponent of what's called spillway gates. This is not raising our dams, but it's putting floodgates in our spillways to retain additional water. That can be done economically, and it's feasible. I'm also very interested in the brackish water opportunities at the mouth of the Petaluma River. This is much less expensive and much less environmentally impactful than doing a desal plant in Marin County. So those are some of the options we have available going forward.
Thanks. Before we go forward, the people in the back, can you hear?
I think the microphone's have to be closer to the mouth.
Okay.
Can you ask the question again first?
Yeah, I will. But just note that some people are still having trouble hearing, so.
Can you hear me? No. The microphones need to be closer to your mouth.
Straight on, face all the way close. Just keep it up.
Oh. Do you hear me now? Do you hear me?
Okay. I'll repeat the question. It is clear that Marin water needs to augment its water supply in a challenging world of climate change. A number of water resilience options are being studied and are under consideration. This study, the Strategic Water Supply Assessment, is not completed. But from what you know to date, what strategies do you believe are most promising as a roadmap to meet future supply needs?
I feel like the strategy that should be taken is one that represents our constituents, as it is a politician's job to represent their constituents. And fortunately, I've already taken this step, having gone up towards 10,000 houses to talk to people, and at least 3,000 or 4,000 of them directly spoke to residents. Given the public opinion, it appears a modest plan that expands our water supply through water recycling, as well as some level of increased dam capacity in order to supply additional water for the outdoors as well as indoor water use, and that is affordable to those struggling to pay their rent and bills and who may not want the most expensive plans. Therefore, that is how I plan to approach this issue.
Thank you. Ranjit?
Thanks. Setting a goal is critical. We need to have a target that we're aiming for. Reaching a target such as 4 years of water supply will take a combination of different interventions. Some of them have been mentioned already. So I'm not going to try to really map all those out. I'm just going to focus on the issues that are causing this continual cycle of water shortage, and that is our 100% reliance on rainwater for potable drinking purposes. In that portfolio of solutions that we developed to hit our target of water supply, we have to now include diversification away from rain. We really only have 3 options for doing that: wastewater recycling and reuse for both potable and non-potable purposes, desalinization, whether it's in saltwater, brackish water, done alone at MMWD or in collaboration with other agencies, and the importing of water from areas that are not as affected by the same rainfall patterns that we have here on the coast.
Thank you. Shona?
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, so like everybody said, we need more water, so I'll skip that part. I think the basic solutions I can draw from watching the Jacobs report analysis over several water board meetings. And so I have my favorites. And I think the low-hanging fruit here is really, number one, conservation. There are still many ways that we can increase our water supply through conservation. I'm talking about cisterns, gray water, changing gardens, and AMI and turf replacement. Secondly would be the Sonoma Water Partnership. Storing more water in those regional groundwater banks is a really excellent drought-resistant long-term plan. Thirdly, recycling. We can recycle water. This is an indirect water recycling, which is already allowable by current California law. We can recycle water by, sorry? What happened? Oh, you can hear me, okay.
Are we still having problems?
Yeah, we're still having problems with people not being able to hear the speakers clearly.
Okay, this is a challenge, guys. Just scream into that microphone.
Hello. Okay, ready? Okay, hey, thank you. I believe we need a short, medium, and long-term plan. I think in the face of drought, we now have to look at how we use water, how we waste water, and how we store it, and where we get our supply, and how we charge for it differently. We need a new strategy. We can't look back at historical past to make our decisions in the future. In the short term, we need an emergency plan. We need an insurance plan. And we didn't have it last year, and it got pretty scary. We spent $10 million trying to get a pipeline across the bridge, and that wasn't the answer. So we need a short-term plan. A lot of it will come from conservation efforts. I believe we can start to begin to retake the recycling lead that we had with Las Colinas decades ago. But in the medium term, call it 8 to 10 years, we need to have a plan that broadens our one water approach. We're partnering with regions in Sonoma and North Bay, sharing infrastructure and pipeline. I think we can talk about how we can give them support and not just take their water away. Thank you.
Jeff?
Okay, am I on here? You hear me? Yep. All right. I absolutely agree that we need a minimum to 4 or 5 years supply of reliable water. To get there, I think we'll evaluate the multiple alternatives presented by the Jacobs report, and we won't pick one. We'll pick a portfolio of alternatives in there. It'll involve enhanced water recycle. It'll include conservation, but across the board, I think we need, as I mentioned in my opening statement, a more integrated relationship with Sonoma and the 1.6 million acre feet of winter water that flows untapped every winter to the ocean. That can be captured for all of us if we do it in partnership. The Sonoma Water, North Marin Water have all given us encouraging signs to cooperate on that, because that would be of benefit for all of us in the whole North Bay.
Thank you. Okay, question 2 is going to start with Larry. Marin's Water Board governs a high fixed cost operation with a deferred capital plan that would require hundreds of millions of dollars to repair or replace its aging infrastructure. How would you address this financial need going forward?
Okay, that is a huge challenge for Marin Water and most of the water districts in the United States. Last 40 years, the federal government has cut assistance to local water districts by around 75%. So we're going to need some help from the federal government. The infrastructure bills that were passed by Congress are going to help. Ultimately, I think what we're going to be looking at is bond funding again. For the last 3 years, we've been on what we call pay-go. We've been paying our bills as we go along. That's been great as far as our credit rating is concerned and taking care of business and not incurring additional debt. Now that we find ourselves at sort of a fork in the road where we need more infrastructure, more access to more water, I think we're going to have to look at bond funding again. A lot of these projects that we're doing are what I call dynastic projects. They can last 100 years. So there's something called generational equity, that these big projects get paid over time by the generations to come, so the cost is shared.
Thank you. Jack, 1 minute.
Can you ask the question again?
Sure. Marine Waters Board governs a high fixed cost operation with a deferred capital plan that would require hundreds of millions of dollars to repair or replace its aging infrastructure. How would you address this financial need going forward?
This will definitely be difficult. However, the most feasible way to do this would be a combination of a local bond measure for the generations to come, as Larry mentioned, along with putting as much pressure as possible on the national and state government to help fund the additional construction costs.
Okay. Ranjiv, same question.
Yeah, it's a tough problem, and maybe the only good thing is we didn't invent it. So all water suppliers are dealing with this, and one of the approaches that is gaining a lot of traction for addressing the financial requirements for infrastructure maintenance and in particular is to use new technologies like advanced metering to collect a lot of real-time data on system performance and analyze that to identify specific hotspots so that we're not trying to renovate an entire system, but actually focusing on the areas that need the most attention using data analytics. That is one way to manage the costs for this very large operation.
Thank you. Shona?
So we do have some high infrastructure costs, and the fixed costs for Marin are pretty, the price per gallon right now, can you hear me? Okay, so the price per gallon right now, which is, less than 1 cent per gallon for water, is really reasonable. And I know the board has traditionally not raised rates as rapidly as people might think. And so I think in order to provide water reasonable rates in the future, we are going to have to raise rates somewhat in order to cover our infrastructure costs. We're going to have to make sure that we reward those that conserve water and put the burden of the cost mostly on the people that do not conserve water. We are going to probably have to float another bond to pay for the infrastructure, but I think it's really important to take advantage of the billions of dollars that are available at the state and local levels for grants. Okay.
Thank you. Jed?
Great. Well, I've spent decades going through financial statements, and I cannot wait to get my hands on and work with the team at MMWD and understand every line item on the top line, how we charge, and why aren't we covering our operating costs and expenses. It seems to me that we have a budget that's based on non-drought years, and therefore we've been losing money. I think we need to rethink how we charge and have a longer-term plan to go about it. I get concerned when we start to use debt as opposed to our just core operations to pay our own bills like any of us would in our houses. So I do think we need a long-term capital plan. I haven't seen it. And that would help voters understand that this is coming. It'll come over time. We're paying for it. As a community, we can step up and take responsibility, and I look forward to working with you to do that.
Thank you. Jack?
Okay, thank you. First of all, let me say that the district has it's an old system, to be sure, and we have aging infrastructure. However, the district has for years now had a regularized program of replacing pipes and keeping it up to date. So, excuse me, we're not as in bad a shape as the question suggested. However, we will need obviously a capital plan going forward to get the new water, and that's going to be a challenge for sure. I am confident it will have to include some rate increases. It will have to include minimizing the pay-as-you-go approach and do some more bonding, all of which will be primarily focused at bringing us new water. And I've actually encouraged the district to begin making the public aware of that, particularly on the rate side. That rates are going to have to become more realistic.
Matt?
I think it makes the most prudent sense to look at the federal and the state grant dollars and see how that is. But at the same time, too, it also is prudent to make sure that we develop a plan that keeps us independent and not rely on those should those not come through. But we're in, quote unquote, the perfect storm. I mean, we've got infrastructure that needs to be replaced. We have employee pensions that need to be addressed. And now on top of that, we have to buy more water because all of that came when the drought is coming now. So it really puts us in a little bit of a tough spot. So bonding, yes, for sure, but it's going to have to be accompanied by some rate raises. And that process has just started now and will go through the next 10 months until those new rates go into effect July 1.
Thank you. The next question, we're going to begin with Jack. The question is, there's 1.6 million acre-feet available in Sonoma County. How might we share that water?
We will share that water accordingly depending on how much additional water is needed here versus in Sonoma County, as well as who's willing to pay for the water, as well as determine what the most essential uses are, whether that be residential water, agricultural water. We must determine all of these things before we can decide precisely how much of the water goes to our residents.
Thank you. Ranjiv?
I believe that's the winter water that was already noted. And that'll be water that becomes available at times when demand may not be that high here due to less irrigation. That means it's essential to find ways to store that excess water. I know that's being evaluated now in the Jacobs Plan, looking at various options, including pipelines directly to Sulahuli and Nicasia reservoirs. The other option is groundwater banking in collaboration with Sonoma. I'm not sure if the capacity that's available for groundwater banking is going to be sufficient to allow us to access all of that water, but it will entail some additional storage capacity if we are to fully maximize the value of that additional water.
Thank you. Shona?
So first I want to just talk a little bit about the use of averages to measure water supply. Because in light of the current climate crisis, averages are really not a good indication of how much water we're going to have available. I think if you look at any data on climate change, you'll see that the average is remaining the same over time or relatively the same. The variability is huge as climate change increases. And so what we need to do is prepare for large deluges, atmospheric rivers, and then long periods of drought. So what we need to do is we need to store water. And we need to do this in a way that is mutually beneficial for both Sonoma and Marin. That means, Marin is paying their share. We also need to acknowledge the interconnectedness of the Sonoma-Marin water supply, because we both depend on each other. Using the aquifer as a banking system is an excellent idea.
Jim?
Great. Well, the Sonoma partnership is absolutely critical for us, and I look forward to helping extend it and solidify it. I think the MMWD has done an outstanding job building a pump station that has increased our use of Sonoma water, but we can go further. And I look forward to partnering with the team to do that. I think it has to be, as I mentioned earlier, about how can we give and help Sonoma as much as they're helping us and not have it be viewed as a one-way street. And I think in some ways, Sonoma does view just us taking the water. But a regional approach, partnering with Novato and Stafford Lake, partnering with the winter water that's coming through the Russian River, and making sure that we have infrastructure and pipeline that can connect all of us. We can invest in that. We can help Sonoma, and we can get access to that water both as an insurance plan in the short term and in the medium term, I hope can help us solve our water needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Jack?
Okay, thank you. The 1,600,000 acre-feet of water is primarily winter water. It has been consistent even in dry years. The answer obviously has to include more storage. That's how we capture that water, again, for the benefit of the whole North Bay region. I envision more reservoirs, not necessarily creek reservoirs. I'm not for tapping any more of our creeks that are already endangered, but reservoirs that are off of creeks, basically equivalent to a natural water tank. I see those as community reservoirs that are done in cooperation with the whole North Bay. Each agency, each area would put in their water, be able to tap it as they need it. And historically, that water has come unfaulting even in our drier years over the last 20 years.
Thank you. Matt?
You know, it's unfortunate that Mother Nature wasn't consulted when making water district boundaries, because this would make it a lot easier. But I think it's the job of the board to set policies so that we can look to tear down those borders when we're looking to make regional approaches for the water piece. The storage piece has been hit over the head over and over again, but it has to be mutual. We can't just go and take the water. We actually have to bring something to the table and bring something beneficial for both us and Sonoma, and that's going to include the increased storage, most likely in their county, but we have to be able to contribute to that.
Thanks. Larry?
So the 1.6 billion acre feet does refer to winter water. Jack Gibson wrote an excellent article in the IJ about that. It's interesting, we're tapping their water below Lake Sonoma. So when we get that winter water, we're actually not decreasing their storage. So that helps their generosity. On the other hand, that's very expensive water. That's about $1,200 per acre foot. So we can't take it for granted. So I go back to some of the comments the other candidates have made. To help Sonoma, we need to help ourselves. We need to increase local storage. We need to augment, encourage conservation. I think Sonoma needs to see that Marin is trying to take care of its own needs and live within its means. I also think we need to improve our distribution system here in Marin so that we can take more of that water. Right now, we're limited to about 5,000 acre feet in our system. There's pinch points. We need to expand those pinch points. At that point, we can basically stop our treatment plants and backfill our system, and that's what we do to augment supply at the current time. But we need to help ourselves to help Sonoma.
The next question we're going to begin with Ranjiv. This is a very long question, I apologize. The district's watershed has become a recreational mecca for a wide range of users. At present, approximately 2 million visitors annually use the watershed to hike, bike, and picnic. Marin Water is in the midst of preparing a watershed recreation management plan. How would you design a balanced recreation management plan that accommodates competing visitors and also protects the integrity of the watershed and its native wildlife and habitat, ensures the preservation of our high-quality water supply, and provides adequate staffing for enforcement of regulations? And just if that wasn't long enough, we got a related question from the audience. What is your position on Class 1 e-bikes on fire roads? So,
If the question is longer
then
than
the
1
answer.
minute,
I apologize. Just take any piece of it and answer it.
I will do my best, but wait, don't start the stopwatch. All right, I think there's a couple of issues here, right? That I think there's two issues really that that are included in that sentence. How do we manage the ecosystem of the watershed, the incredible biodiversity we have here in the face of all this demand for access, and how do we manage competing demands? Biodiversity, let's map those hot spots, let's identify the most sensitive areas, and let's make sure that they get the most attention. Managing competing demands, let's use this plan to rebuild our trail systems so that they are fit for purpose. We're currently relying on social trails that were established 100 years ago. They're not good for biking. They're not good for multi-purpose use. We need to take examples from places where they do have fit-for-purpose multi-use systems and rebuild ours for that purpose.
Very good. Okay, Shauna, now it's your turn.
Oh, it's still on. Okay. Yeah, I think this is a really complicated issue, and I definitely don't have all the answers.
Wait, sorry. Okay. The e-bikes. I just remember the e-bikes. I do use the fire roads a lot for hiking and biking, and about 50% of the bikes now on those fire roads are e-bikes. And I know there's a policy against that, but there's a moratorium on enforcing that policy. I think the policy now needs to catch up with the reality of e-bikes on those fire roads. When they're on fire roads, I would argue that they're a viable option.
So we're probably going a minute and a half on this one.
Sorry.
That's okay. You said some good things. Yeah, so I mean, from my perspective, the watershed is protected by specific policies that have been already created by the Marin Municipal Water District. And I think we should really pay attention to those policies. I think that the first and foremost objective of the Marin Municipal Water District watershed is, for protection of the water. We need to protect our water. We need to protect the quality of our water. And any recreation that happens on the watershed should be secondary to this and also protect the watershed as well. I think it's really important that hikers are safe. And this is definitely is in regard to the e-bike question. I mean, we have to think about if we're going to allow e-bikes, how are we going to regulate this? On which trails are they going to be allowed? And how much erosion are we going to allow? Thank you.
Jed.
Great. Well, MMWD has been given the responsibility to protect our water and to provide safe, affordable, clean drinking water for our people, and anything that gets in the way of that is a problem. So we are dedicated to it, and we have to stand by it. We're also dedicated to protecting this beautiful land. And we are unique. We are a unique water agency that owns a piece of property from the West Point Inn to the San Geronimo Valley and from the east peak of Mount Tam all the way out to Nicasio. We have tremendous territory that has 5 endangered species and 400 other flora and fauna that we have to take care of. However, we have 2 million people using it a year. So I will get to the table with the Sierra Club, who have endorsed me, and the Access for Bikes endorsed me, and I will work with them looking at a map and figure out how we can protect critical land that some folks think need to be, and how we can look at each specific trail and make sure that it adheres to our core mission, delivering safe, affordable, clean drinking water to folks and protecting our watershed. Thank you.
Jack?
Okay, thank you. There is a propensity by well-meaning people to want to measure the success of our watershed by how many people visit it. That is scary, quite frankly, because it's not good for the health of the watershed. Our watershed is our water supply. That's the primary purpose. Now, in 1912, when the district was formed, it was passed by the voters, and part of the referendum that the voters voted for was water plus a park. So there is a commitment to have recreation. Unlike some water districts, we can't shut it off. But I think we have to start with our ability to manage it. We need more rangers. We need a better fund the management on the watershed. We need to bring some order up there before we can formalize and do something official in changing our recreational management plan. We need to be able to manage it.
Thanks. Matt?
I agree with everything so far in terms of the primary mission of the district, and that shouldn't be left off. That should be the guiding star, the North Star in this entire process as we move forward. Nothing should be done to disrupt the watershed we currently have, and in terms of the quality of water we're pushing. But I also think that we should be using science to make these decisions. We sit up here for the past hour or so talking about science making water decisions. We should be able to use that same concept for the recreation piece to some extent. And part of that comes with reevaluating the user mix. And I think in 1912, there weren't too many mountain bikes and there were no Class 1 e-bikes in Marin. But my guess is those people would have fought for usership of that. Not saying that we should be opening up the mountain, that's not what I'm saying, but I think we should reevaluate the user mix and look to find areas where we can find compromise so that more people can use the mountain. You know, I talked about 2 million visitors a year, the most diverse group of folks in the Bay Area, specifically in Marin County, using the watershed last year for recreation. That's amazing, because now we have an entire new generation of stewards that will hopefully see the same value we all do in the quality of that land and be able to carry it forward and want to fight for its quality.
Thank you. Larry?
Yeah, I think Matt's comment about creating another generation of environmentalists through recreation is a point well taken. So there are competing interests and competing groups that use our watershed. Our prime issue at this point that we're looking at is addressing the conflicts that arise on the mountain, primarily between hikers and bikers. So I think we need to look at the county's RTMP plan, which was passed a few years ago as a model. I think we do need to really look at resolving conflicts between the user groups. We may end up creating zones for different user groups. I think we do need to restrict e-bikes to the roads on the watershed. I think opening up trails is very controversial. We're going to be working on that as we go through our process. So as we said with our water assessment, everything's on the table. We're going through this with a consultant in hopefully a public and transparent way. There's going to be some give and take between the groups, and I think we're going to come out with a good plan.
Thank you. Jack?
I feel like the Marin Municipal Water Board's primary job is to supply water and have a stable water supply. And e-bikes should not be the priority of Marin Municipal Water Board. Nonetheless, recreation is an essential part of the watershed, and therefore it is most likely worth giving at least one trail of access to e-bikes, such as the fire trails, one of the fire trails, so that everyone can enjoy the watershed, but there needs to remain some restriction on e-bikes as it damages trails and puts a cost on Marin Municipal Water Board to maintain the trails, and that is not the priority of Marin Municipal Water Board.
Thank you. The next question is a lot shorter. You'll be happy to know. We're going to start with Shona. The district's watershed is difficult topographically with a high fuel load, did I miss something? That has accumulated over many decades and which raises significant fire risk issues. What would you do to address this community safety concern?
I think that's a really good question. And I just want to start out with, addressing the point that the Marin watershed has not burned in 80 years. And what we have here is a fire ecosystem, and it needs to burn in order to become healthy. Historically, the Marin watershed has burned. This has either happened because of, lightning strikes or through natural, cultural, prescribed burning from the coastal Miwok. I think what we need to do is make a concerted effort to use either prescribed burns, goats, or having specific groups go out and remove, thinning some of those thin Douglas stands and, maybe taking out some of the invasive species. What I think we really need to do here is not only work with the fire department, but also work with the Coastal Miwok Indigenous Council, because these are people that have been working on the land for over 10,000 years. They have a lot of knowledge, and we need to tap into it and partner with them.
Thank you. Jed?
Thank you. I was on a hike yesterday in canvassing my neighborhood when a fire broke out up on Camino Alto. And it was sure scary. I mean, it ripped right up this hill. And I want to thank the firefighters of Southern Marin and Mill Valley who got there unbelievably fast. Those guys are heroes, and they stopped that thing. And it was remarkable to watch. But it was also a combination effort of the Marin Municipal Water District that had a tank on the top of that hill that was 100 yards from where the fire line was, and a fire hydrant that the firefighters were able to plug into. Marin Municipal Water District was prepared to support the firefighters, and I was impressed. And it was also the Marin County Parkland. So it was a combination of that group from Marin County Parks, building the fire trails, the Marin Municipal Water District, preparing with water and the fire hydrants, and then these heroic firefighters going up there and putting it out. It was remarkable to watch. In addition, I hope to talk about my next point later.
Jack?
Okay. The Water District has a very effective grant program where we have actually been very successful in getting state and federal money to do a wildfire protection program on the watershed, where we do trail maintenance, particularly in the urban interface areas where you have extreme concerns. So we have a very vigorous program that with many volunteers and up there working almost continually around the year. We also have several of our rangers, our trained firefighters, that are in place to hold off until we can get Marin Fire on site to protect us with the fires. And also, we have a vast educational program trying to prevent people from doing not bright things up there like smoking cigarettes, which was the cause of a fire not that long ago.
Thanks. Matt?
Okay, like was mentioned, we live in a Mediterranean climate in coastal California. That's fire is part of it. And fire historically would burn every 5 to 10 years throughout the state for a long period of time. And 80 years obviously is much longer than that. And the result is photosynthesis didn't stop, and we have a large accumulation of dead and down fuel, as well as some live fuel too that's both ripe for burning. But the issue now is too big for one jurisdiction to handle. Marin Municipal cannot take this on their own, and they have to be able to partner with an agency that's doing this professionally. Volunteers and a small army of rangers is not going to be the ticket to success. We're decades behind the work, and we have to start looking strategically at what areas need to be interrupted, meaning how do we break up the fuel continuity in the watershed. Should a fire ignite, it wouldn't be able to translate into a neighborhood or from a neighborhood across the watershed. Because if it does, the catastrophic results of a fire could potentially destroy our water supply. So it needs to be addressed right away.
Larry?
So, yeah, it is a fire ecology up there. I'm a little bit leery about prescribed burns because our development patterns have encroached into the watershed. So our strategy now is actually to use mechanical and manual vegetation reduction around infrastructure, including our reservoirs, to create a defensible line and also to create a defensible space around the homes surrounding our watershed. We generally are bringing in crews. We're not depending on rangers or staff to do a lot of that. So we are bringing in large crews of people. I took a tour. You all should take a tour around Lake Lagunitas and see what we've done above Lagunitas. I have advocated for improving our firefighting equipment in the district, enlarging our tanks on some of our fire equipment, improving cell phone coverage in the water district so that visitors can report anything. And we did have a recent fire. It was a wake-up call, but it's been something that's been on our agenda for quite a while, and I think we've been pretty successful at it.
Jeff?
While there are many Band-Aid options for how to approach this fire problem, such as having volunteers occasionally remove the brush, or once in a while having goats graze the area, in the end, if we really want to address this fire problem, we are going to need to consider passing a bond to pay for rangers and full-time broom and other fire hazardous underbrush removal employees to keep the watersheds as clean and fireproof as possible at all times.
Ranjiv?
Every complicated endeavor, whether it's flying an airplane or delivering water to a large population, has a risk management plan. Proactive strategy for identifying risks and ensuring that systems are in place for addressing those risks. I hope MMWD has a risk management plan for managing fire risks. If it does not, then I would argue that's the #1 imperative, and presumably that risk management plan would include many of the interventions that have already been noted and address many of the concerns that have already been noted.
Thank you. The next question, we're going to start with Jed. All of the issues discussed which face the Marin Water Board in the near future will require significant funding. Consequently, what level of associated water rates do you believe will be necessary, and how would you structure them? What steps would you take to educate the public on needed infrastructure improvements and encourage acceptance of water rate increases?
Thank you. I think the communication part is critical, and there's lots of different ways that we can go about it, but we need to help people understand that the watershed is responsible for a lot of things. We just talked about fire risk mitigation, recreation, preservation of a critical habitat and endangered species, etc. But our budget right now is not written for current days. We lost $20 million last year, 10 to try to build a pipeline across the bridge, and 10 because we had the drought. And then we have another drought again, and we're gonna come up short again. So we need a new budget. We need a new thought process on how we charge for water. Currently, we have 4 tiers, and most people are doing a pretty darn good job. 75% of our county is in tier 1. I do think that we can further encourage folks in tier 1 by splitting it into 2 tiers. And the folks that are really saving, we can probably help them pay less. But on the higher, there are some pretty big water users in our district, and they be charged more. And I look forward to looking at the new rate structure, which is happening now. It will be one of the first things we do, and it will be a part of that.
Thank you. Jeff?
Water rates, to a certain extent, I think, and I have said this to the district for years, we don't communicate properly on when we're talking about water rates. By necessity, water rates are based on the more water you use, the higher rate you pay. And it's talked and presented in terms of selling water, as if we're selling water. We, in fact, are not selling water. That's not what we're doing. When neighbors and friends ask me about I say the water's free. You take a bucket, head up to the watershed and help yourself. And if anybody gives you a problem, tell them Jack said you could do it. What we charge for is the infrastructure, the process of the water, the delivery of the water. That's what you pay for. if people understand that, it's much easier to relate to the rates. I think there would be much less hostility to the rates if we could get that message across.
Thank you. Matt?
I'd like to continue on the messaging portion of it because I think the community, especially here in Marin County, is well informed, but they also make educated decisions should they know what they're actually paying for, meaning what does the Marin Municipal Water District do and what do you get for the cost of your water? We talk about the complexity of just the geography in the county and how so much more infrastructure is needed just to get your water to you, but that's part of the price of living in a beautiful area with hills, and also too part of the price of being able to protect it and keep the ecology protected and the environment conserved moving forward, as well as the fire risk now, and also understanding that things have changed. And we touched on the recreation piece enough, but I don't want to hammer that one too hard. But also too to educate the voters, the ratepayers, that the cost of water we're paying right now is relatively low at 1 cent a gallon comparatively. If we look to raise that and understand why and look to show, relatively speaking, to the rest of the state, I think that starts to gain traction and more acceptance, and we can actually present a budget that will allow us to start paying off some of the big items we've talked about tonight.
Thank you. Larry?
So right now, we bill on a blended basis. Excuse me. There's fixed fees for watershed maintenance and infrastructure. Those are fees that we have to pay no matter how much you use. Even if you're a great low water user, one of the 75% that are in tier 1, we still have to pay for the pipes, the pumps, and everything else to deliver that water to you, no matter how much water you use. So we went to a split type of billing system where there's a fixed fee for watershed. We need to take care of the watershed no matter how much water we're using. We need to take care of our infrastructure. Same thing, it's a fixed cost. Then we have a volumetric billing system for water, which does encourage conservation. That is a message that needs to go out. We are not selling a product. We are managing a very precious resource. And we are providing a service that is really central to the public health of our community. And I think that's a message that's got to go out and it's got to be understood by folks.
Thank you. Jeff?
Could you ask the question again?
Sure. All issues already discussed which face the Marin Water Board in the near future will require significant funding. Consequently, what level of associated water rates do you believe will be necessary, and how would you structure them? What steps would you take to educate the public on needed infrastructure improvements and encourage acceptance of water rate increases?
Given that higher income users tend to be heavier water users and are subsequently the flagship reason that we need additional water compared to any other constituents, we should consider skewing the cost towards heavy water users and putting as little as possible of it upon lower income water conservers. We will also need to start communicating more regularly with the public. And to do that, I will be available for people to talk to me in person at least once a week, and hopefully more if additional people want to talk to me in person throughout District 3 in order to educate them as well as possible and answer their concerns accordingly.
Thank you. Ranjiv?
MMWD is currently running an operating deficit. That's not unusual for water suppliers, but it's a very dangerous place to be because maintenance suffers, new infrastructure can't be developed. We can always look for operating efficiencies to reduce costs, but rates will have to go up. Now, in order to convince the public, I think we should look at our history. Much of the infrastructure that we're currently benefiting from was built by previous generations, much smaller populations. Alpine Dam was built in 1917, the Pine Mountain Tunnel around the same time. Those were massive investments that were covered by much smaller populations. If we want to continue to use that infrastructure, build upon it so that we have services available for the next 100 years, we're going to have to make the same type of investments that our predecessors made here in Marin. I think once our citizens understand that, we'll all agree to that.
Thank you. Shona?
Is that on? Yeah, okay. All right, so yes, definitely our water rates are extremely low compared to other areas of the country. And I think that covering our operational costs is going to become increasingly more difficult as people conserve more and more water. So the cost of service is going to be most of the cost of providing the water. And as my colleagues have said here, we really need to price water based on service and not as a commodity. This is just the way forward. The water is precious, and we need to pay for it. We need to make sure that people understand that this is the case. In order to pay for more infrastructure, we may also need to float a bond in order to pay for, in order to maintain our bond rating. We may need to also increase water rates as well, so it's sort of like a vicious cycle. So it's a little hard to figure out right now exactly what the water rates are going to be.
Thank you. The next question, we're going to begin with Jack Gibson. Dick Spotswood has demanded that candidates commit to desalination or other supply options before the election. Are you in favor of a desal plant?
I'm sorry, the last part of the question?
Are you in favor of a desal plant?
Yes, I am. In 2010, we had a prototype desal project up, and I was for it then. I'll be for it now. It's a very viable alternative, I think, for our water supply. In fact, I'll take it a step further. I think it is inevitable as part of our water supply. Probably, however, because of the cost and difficulty in putting it in place, I see it as something that comes about by a partnership. Perhaps, as I've suggested before, a partnership with our partners to the north, North Marin and Sonoma, and it has been proposed that something like that could be done at the mouth of the Petaluma River. I think that's possibly a very viable alternative, and I would support it.
Thank you. Matt?
I do think the desal option should be kept on the table. We see communities of larger size being able to take on their own projects, and then water districts similar to the size of Marin looking to do a regional project. And it doesn't take too far to drive all the way to the city of Antioch, who's put together a regional project and has actually got it built now, or in the process of building now, but they're doing a couple key things. It's going to be regional, and they have the ability to expand as needed, which is going to be critical as we start getting further impacted by climate change, and the demand for water could increase. But the regional approach is prudent financially for the district, and it's also, I think, prudent just as we look to be able to share water throughout the region and be able to give water to other areas that need it more some years, and then be able to take more when we need it in other years too. But I also think it's imperative that we let technology start running this race a little bit. And what I mean by that is recycled water, in fact, direct potable recycled water is becoming more and more of a viable option. And if that becomes a much less of a financial burden than desalination, providing somewhat the similar amount or supply, then we should look at that as well.
Thank you. Larry?
So I favor a phased approach to many of these high capital projects, including desalination. We haven't finished our strategic water assessment, and all options do remain on the table. The desalination option is very expensive, and it's very environmentally impactful. So it's got a lot of baggage with it, and there are a lot of inefficiencies in our existing system that need to be addressed. So again, I favor a phased approach. First, we need to eliminate the waste and inefficiency in our current assets. We need to maximize the assets that we have, like I suggested earlier, with spillway gates, conservation, and other steps. The Antioch plant, which is being held out as the model, is actually a brackish water desal plant. It's not an ocean water desal plant. As I mentioned earlier, I think a facility at the mouth of the Petaluma River, which is a brackish water plant, much less expensive, much less environmentally impactful, and it would be a regional program. Is very, very inviting on a theoretical level, but there's a lot of things that need to be researched, explored, and worked out.
Thank you. Jack?
I do see desalinization with brackish water at the mouth of the Petaluma River, as Larry mentioned, as something to consider. However, I feel like our recycled water options need to be exercised first, as I consider that the low-hanging fruit at this time in Marin County for water supply, especially for outdoor irrigation, which is the most commonly challenged and questioned form of water use at this time.
Thank you. Ranjiv?
77, 91, 2021. These are all periods when MMWD either ran out of water, 77, or came very close. And as I mentioned in the very beginning, that's because 100% of our potable water is rainfall. That puts us at a high level of vulnerability. So as I said earlier, we need to diversify our portfolio beyond rainwater. I think the three options I noted were wastewater recycling and reuse for irrigation and potable purposes, desalinization, and transfers from areas that are not affected by the same precipitation patterns that we are.
Thank you. Shona?
So I guess I'm alone in saying, no, I don't think this is a very good idea. So there's so many other options out there for sourcing water, and desalination is, in general, very environmentally impactful. So when you're talking about the desal plants proposed to be on the bay, at the intake and at the outflow, you're going to have massive mortality of all of the fishes and invertebrates and other organisms in the bay. You have a problem getting rid of brine. Even if it's mixed, it's still full of scaling chemicals. So it has been proposed that we put a desal plant on the Petaluma River. From what I understand, this desal plant would be in an area that is part of one of the most precious and largest estuaries in San Pablo Bay. Yes, we would take water from subsurface sources, which would be environmentally maybe not so impactful, but where are we going to put the brine? And how are we going to dispose of it? And what if there are descaling agents in the brine? How are they going to affect the Petaluma River?
Jed?
Thank you. Probably no more of a hot button issue than desal right now. There are some people that are firmly for it as the only answer for us, and there's certain people who are like, never, ever will I let that happen. So it is a politically difficult issue to get through. We just saw in Huntington Beach, it got rejected by the Coastal Commission. There's a bunch of reasons why it's difficult to do in the short term, and as I said, I have a short, medium, and long-term plan. I do not think desal is going to be happening here in the short term, and it'd be super hard to happen in the medium term. Long term, as Jack Gibson said, maybe that will be the only answer and we all have to do it. It's super expensive up front. It costs a lot of money to operate it. It uses an enormous amount of energy that helps make climate change worse. It has issues for the environment with the water coming in and the brine coming out. The technology, in my mind, is not there right now. I wouldn't be supportive of having it implemented in the short term, but we need to keep all options open. We need to be looking for a long-term plan because our existing water supply is not enough. Thank you.
All right, this is the last question. And we're going to start with Matt. Marin Water is overseen by only 5 directors who have various backgrounds and experiences. Please explain the unique expertise and skills you would bring to the board and any professional experience you have in collaboration and partnerships that would be an asset to the board. Beginning with Matt.
Well, I think we go back to the board is really, the primary goal is to set policy and drive. But as we're looking at a water crisis, and one of the main reasons why I was interested in running for this position is that we've been dealing with a fire crisis on my side of the house professionally now for some time. We got woken up to it in 2017. We didn't have as many wake-up calls as we faced here in Marin, like was mentioned in the multiple drought years, but we really did in 2017. But what we can do differently and what we do differently now is we plan when it's okay. We plan before an event happens, and we continually prepare and make sure that when the next thing happens, not if, but when the next event happens, we are better prepared for it. We go back to the mantra, and what I'd like to bring is a preparedness perspective that stays left of what we call bang, or left of an event that is detrimental to a community. And we do everything we can to make sure the impact from that is negligible for the community. Because just like with water, we can't fail in the fire service, we can't fail to deliver water to the public, and we must do everything we can, even in good years, to make sure that we're better prepared for the future and anticipate what that danger is going to be.
Thank you. Larry?
So what I think I bring to the table as far as my personal experience is my experience in municipal government in Fairfax. We're innovators, and I think we are going to need innovation going forward. You know, Marin is actually a very small water district. We only have 60,000 accounts. San Diego, which has a large desal plant, has over 1 million accounts. So we're orders of magnitude smaller. We have to innovate. And my whole career has demonstrated the ability to bring people together to innovate. We started Marin Clean Energy. That came out of the Fairfax Town Council. We started the Community Media Center of Marin. So we have to work together. And I think, you know, what I bring is the ability to bring people together, to communicate, to do the give and take that's involved in getting us there. One other thing, if I have 10 more seconds. As an attorney, you go through many different cases involving many different scientific and medical issues, and I've learned to work with experts, and I've learned to incorporate that kind of information and make sound policy decisions based on the science, based on the experts. And Marin is reaching out to some of the best experts in the Bay Area to help us guide us through our current situation. But we're all in this together, and we're all going to need to work together.
Thank you. Jack?
As a nonprofit director of an organization that directly works to represent and engage the public opinion, I believe that will make it so I can better engage and represent what the public seeks than other candidates who are not offering to speak directly to the public in person multiple times a week if needed, and truly go out of their way to represent the public as much as possible. And I therefore believe that is what I believe I have to offer over any of the other candidates.
Thank you. Ranjiv?
So almost 20 years ago, as I noted in the introduction, I founded and built up an organization that specializes in water and sanitation planning. We work now at global levels. Much of the innovation that is needed for addressing our water issues is occurring in other places. It's the connections I have and the experience that I have in engaging with those innovators in other places that will help address the issues that we have here in Marin. And I look forward to bringing that global network of expertise to address water supply improvement here.
Thank you. Shona?
So what do I bring to the board? So I am a scientist and I'm an educator. I educate students at the undergraduate level at UC Berkeley, SF State, and I'm going to be working at City College of San Francisco. I'm pretty good at explaining complex scientific topics to people that don't know them. So I think that my educational background will come in handy when talking to the public about the ideas around the various decisions that are being made by the board. Secondly, I'm a scientist, and watching these board meetings, and I've watched a lot of them, and looking at the Jacobs engineering report, and also the presentations by some of the water managers, I really feel like I could bring a lot of insight to that process. Just because I'm used to looking at numbers, I'm used to crunching data, and I'm used to using large data sets to extract information, I think that there are definitely some insights that I could bring to this process. I also know the Bay Area ecosystem very well. I worked on it during my dissertation. I studied the delta. I understand water intake systems and their effects on fish, and the general health of the ecosystem. And yes, we can talk to experts, but I think that there's something to be said for having a deep existing knowledge of the subject. Thank you.
Jed?
Thank you. I've spent decades working with boards on all levels, as a CEO reporting to boards, as a board member, and as chair of the board of over a dozen companies and not-for-profit organizations that I've started focused on watershed protection, called the Herring Pond Watershed Association, as well as larger corporations and smaller corporations. To be successful in working on a board, you need to know how to work with your partners, to listen, leadership through listening rather than directing, having other people argue your arguments for you, partnering with others to be smarter than you, to bring in the best possible scientists and analytics to make your decisions and then make the call. Have the right reporting, do the analysis, and move. Innovate. Try to make the best possible decisions you can. You know you might be wrong, but you have to be bold. I hope to bring this. I think as one story, the company that I took public had on its board John Doerr and Brooke Byers from Kleiner Perkins, Jeff Bezos, and Howard Schultz from Starbucks, and we accomplished amazing things. And working with that amount of testosterone in a room was difficult, but I think I was able to cross lines. Partnerships will be critical for us, and I think as a board, I hope to be very helpful in doing that. Thank you.
Jack?
Yes, thank you. I am basically a collaborative person. I bring people together to work for a common purpose, for a common cause. In that capacity, I've been the co-founder and chair of North Bay Watershed Association for many years. I am the vice chair of the North Bay Water Recycle Authority, and I've been the Water District's representative at the North Bay Water Contractors periodic meetings. All of which puts me in a perfect place to develop the relationships we need for bringing about the kind of regional partnership that I've talked about. That is absolutely right up my alley. Thank you.
That concludes the question portion of this forum. Before the candidates make their closing statements, here is some useful information about the election. New this year, Marin County has implemented the Voters' Choice Act, offering more days and more ways to vote. And you should get, I just got it today in the mail, you should get a little brochure on the Voters' Choice Act. Now, all active registered voters are automatically mailed a ballot about a month before the election. For in-person voting, vote centers have replaced assigned neighborhood polling places. A complete list of locations is included in the Marin County Voter Information Guide and also in this little mailer. Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th. If you wish to register to vote, or if you've moved since the last time you voted and need to re-register, you may register online up to October 24th. If you forget to register or update your voter registration, you can take advantage of same-day voter registration. You may register to vote and vote on Election Day at your county election office or at any vote center in the county. I'd like to highlight one helpful, easy-to-use online resource that provides unbiased election-related information. This site, Voters Edge, is a joint project of the League of Women Voters and MapLight, a nonpartisan research organization. When you enter your street address and zip code, you will see your own ballot with links to candidates, issues, ballot measures, information about the voting process itself, and much more. And now the candidates will make closing statements of 1 minute. We'll go in reverse order of the opening statements, starting with Jed Smith.
Great, thank you. Well, I've been having a lot of fun in this process. This listening tour that I've been on, I've met so many people and so many thoughtful people. It would be a privilege to be a steward for our community. I've also heard a lot of vitriol and a lot of ire and pointing fingers and blame. And I think it's too bad, and I step back, and I feel like it's rooted in many ways in fear of the unknown, in fear of uncertainty, and seeing what's happening in the Colorado River and in Los Angeles. And I would love to turn that conversation around. I'd love to turn this to be about what can we do as a community? How can we step up and be a part of the answer? Rather than blaming, how can we volunteer? How can we create an ambassador program that can help all of us be stewards for this? And hopefully, within a few years, I think we will look back at MMWD with pride, and I look forward to be a part of that process.
Thank you. Shona?
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to this forum. I learn a tremendous amount every time I come to these things. And I just look forward to other opportunities to engage with this community and learn more about your views on water. So I will, if I'm elected, I'm going to use my deep knowledge of the Bay Area ecosystem in order to make sure that the board makes environmentally and socially responsible choices for a future water supply. I will engage other water districts in mutually beneficial partnerships to create water resiliency. I will invite the Coastal Miwok Tribal Council to help inform our watershed management through their knowledge of cultural controlled burns. And finally, I will work hard to make sure that there's fair and equitable water distribution with discounted rates for vulnerable and disadvantaged communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ranjiv?
I never understand. Jed always has fun at these things, and how come I don't have as much fun? You know, when I started thinking about this, the first thing about the board, the first thing I did was read Jack Gibson's amazing book on the history of MMWD. If you haven't read it, please do. Buy a copy. I don't know if Jack gets the money from that. But the thing that will jump out to you is the vision that created MMWD beginning in 1912. Our community leaders understood the importance of a reliable, safe, and sustainable water supply to support a community that wanted to prosper. And they accomplished that. We're still benefiting from it. But what I feel like now is we've lost that sense of vision. It's constant damage control that the district is engaged with now. I will hope that together we can bring back a sense of vision for MMWD that will address the challenges we're speaking about now and ensure a water supplier that's functioning 120 years from now, if not longer. And as part of that vision, I will argue we should never have to open the Marin IJ and read that we're down to 6 months of water supply or less, ever again.
Thank you. Jeff?
I was happy to come here tonight and perform one of my favorite activities, public speaking. And I hope to see in the next 4 years an improved water supply and as happy as possible constituents in terms of a combination of water supply, infrastructure, and cost of water so that our county is as well managed as possible.
Thank you. Larry?
Our biggest challenge is climate change and climate disruption. And that's a scary thing. And the fear is reasonable, but we can't make decisions based on fear. We need to be deliberative and collaborative, and we have been. Our board has been, I have been throughout my career. It's give and take. It's bringing people together to innovate, to meet the challenges of the future. We've taken a very holistic approach to the drought. We've increased supply, we've increased conservation. We have more miles to go. Our plans are already in process. We're going to get there as a community. And we just need to work together and have faith in each other. We're all in this together. Marin has a lot of intellectual and social assets that it can draw on, and I'm very confident going forward, and I'd like to continue my work to accomplish that and get us there. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt.
Well, thank you to the group and for hosting this evening, and thank you for all other candidates for participating. It's been a good experience. I wouldn't use fun yet, Judd, but I'll get there. We talked about some serious topics tonight, but even after all the discussion, I'm very optimistic about the future of the MMWD. And I'm very optimistic with the potential that I can bring to the board, a new perspective, one that understands that we can't continue to look to yesterday's answers to solve tomorrow's problems. We're too far behind the curve from that. We need to be able to move forward and think outside the box and come up with creative solutions. I lived through the '91 drought when we had to ration 50 gallons per person per day. And as a kid, it was a lot of fun to learn how to flush a toilet with a bucket of water. 30 years later, as a father, teaching your children, it's not fun anymore. It's not. But we've been given a gift. The watershed and the water district is a gift, but it's only going to remain a gift if we can carry it forward, and I'd like to be able to do that for the generations to come. Thank you.
Thanks. Jack?
Okay, thank you. You've heard what I'm for. I see the vision immediately out there of a partnership with all of the North Bay solving our water problems. That's why I decided to run for re-election again. That very graspable objective that I see as a real possibility. If you look at my endorsements, you will see that I have water district members endorsing me from North Bay watershed, from Sonoma Water, across the board, across the region. It's those relationships that I've built that I see making possible the immediate achievement of a regional approach to solving all of our water problems. Thank you, but I need your vote to do it. Oh, and lastly, for the record, I've assigned all of the proceeds from the book to the Water District Watershed Fund.
Thank you. That concludes our forum. We'd like to thank CMCM, the Community Media Center of Marin, for recording this event. Thank you to the Marin Conservation League and the Marin League of Women Voters for making tonight's forum possible. Thanks to the candidates for participating, to Elaine Biagini for timekeeping, and to Linda Sula, Susan Stomp, Roger Roberts, and Ann Thomas for collecting and reviewing questions. And thanks to you for joining us tonight, and most importantly, for voting. Good evening.